Hello everyone, so I'm here today to make a video for you about, of all things, Duck Dynasty. Unless you've been living under a particularly large rock for the past few days, there's been somewhat of a controversy brewing around Duck Dynasty. Now, you probably have a lot of questions. What is Duck Dynasty? Why should I care? Was Karl Marx right? All these questions will be answered in due time, but let's begin with the very basics. What is Duck Dynasty? Well, Duck Dynasty is an American reality TV show shown on the A&E channel that follows the lives of a family that got rich making duck calls. Yep. Admittedly, I have not seen a single episode of Duck Dynasty, but in my defense, that is purely because I have much better things to do with my life. Anyway, recently, the so-called patriarch of the family, Phil Robertson, did an interview with GQ magazine in which he made several bigoted remarks about gay people and black people. Quote, "It seems like, to me, a vagina, as a man, would be more desirable than a man's anus. That's just me. I'm just thinking, there's more there. She's got more to offer. I mean, come on, dudes. You know what I'm saying? But hey, sin. It's not logical, my man. It's just not logical." Upon being asked by the interviewer what, in your mind, is sinful, he said the following: "Start with homosexual behaviour and just morph out from there. Bestiality, sleeping around with this woman and that woman and that woman and those men." There is so much wrong with these statements that it's hard to know exactly where to begin, but let's start with his apparent inability to grasp the very concept of sexual orientation. The reason why vaginas are more desirable to him is not because there is anything objectively more attractive about female body parts. It's not because they have more to offer, whatever that means. It's because he's straight. It's his sexual orientation that makes women the focus of his sexual desires. It's not like men make a list of the pros and cons between vagina and man anus and then decide whether they're going to be straight or gay based on that. There are no rational, objective reasons why one is better or worse than the other. People are attracted to what they're attracted to. Sexual orientation is not based on what you ought to find appealing. It's just what you find appealing. Aside from that, he also states that homosexuality is a sin, not logical, and worst of all, comparable to bestiality. Unsurprisingly, people were a bit upset. In the same interview, he also went on to make several questionable remarks about black people. Quote, "I never with my eyes saw the mistreatment of any black person. Not once. Where we lived was all farmers. The blacks worked for the farmers. I hoed cotton with them. I'm with the blacks because we're white trash. We're going across the field, they're singing and happy. I never heard one of them, one black person say, 'I tell you what, those doggone white people.' Not a word. Pre-entitlement, pre-welfare, you say? Were they happy? They were godly. They were happy. Not one was singing the blues." Which kind of begs the question, why then do the blues even exist? Regardless, you've got this guy, Phil Robertson, a white guy by the way, saying that blacks were happier during the era of cotton picking. Right. After the interview was published, A&E indefinitely suspended Phil Robertson from appearing on the show, saying the following in a statement. Quote, "We are extremely disappointed to have read Phil Robertson's comments in GQ, which are based on his own personal beliefs and not reflected in the series Duck Dynasty. His personal views in no way reflect those of A&E Network, who have always been strong supporters and champions of the LGBT community. The network has placed Phil under hiatus from filming indefinitely." Unsurprisingly, controversy erupts. Social conservatives of every kind come out in support of Phil Robertson and against A&E's decision to suspend him. Sarah Palin tweeted the following, quote, "Free speech is endangered species. Those intolerant, hating and taking on Duck Dynasty patriarch for voicing personal opinion take on us all." Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal wrote the following on his website, quote, "The politically correct crowd is tolerant of all viewpoints except those they disagree with." Texas Senator Ted Cruz wrote the following on his Facebook page, quote, "Free speech matters. The reason that so many Americans love Duck Dynasty is because it represents the America usually ignored or mocked by liberal elites. A family that loves and cares for each other, believes in God, and speaks openly about their faith." Yeah, because if there's one thing that liberal elites hate, it's families that love and care for each other. Consequently, several conservative groups and anti-gay organizations such as the Family Research Council, the American Family Association, and the Liberty Council issued statements of support. The National Organization for Marriage started a petition demanding Phil Robertson's reinstatement and an apology from A&E. A Facebook group entitled Stand With Phil Robertson started a petition of its own expressing a similar desire to see Robertson Robertson be reinstated. Images like these began to appear on several social networking sites and were shared by people pledging their support to Robertson. Eventually, Phil Robertson released a statement to Fox 411 reacting to the backlash, stating the following, quote, "My mission today is to go forth and tell people about why I follow Christ and also what the Bible teaches, and part of that teaching is that women and men are meant to be together. However, I would never treat anyone with disrespect just because they are different from me. We are all created by the Almighty, and like him, I love all of humanity. We would all be better off if we loved God and loved each other." Okay, so I want to point out three things. First of all, I would like to respond to the statement that Phil Robertson issued to Fox 411, in which he said that he would never treat anyone with disrespect just because they were different from him, and that he loves all of humanity. Really? While all this controversy was raging on, TMZ unearthed the video of Phil Robertson preaching at a church in Pennsylvania in 2010. In what can only be described as a homophobic tirade, Robertson explicitly states that homosexuals are, quote, "full of murder, envy, strife, hatred. They are insolent, arrogant, God-haters. They are heartless, they are faithless, they are senseless, they are ruthless, they invent ways of doing evil." You don't get to say shit like that and then claim that you would never disrespect gay people and that you love all of humanity. There is nothing loving about saying that gay people are full of murder and that they invent ways of doing evil. So much of the rhetoric coming from Phil Robertson's supporters is being made in an attempt to sanitize and obscure his intensely hateful and prejudiced views, framing them as mere viewpoints and personal beliefs. Bullshit. If you want to see Phil Robertson be reinstated, that's fine. But don't pretend that his statements are any less bigoted than they are. Secondly, there is a conspicuous lack of discussion regarding what Phil Robertson said about black Americans. While not as explicitly hateful as what he said about gay people, I mean, he never said that being black is a sin or compared them to those who fuck animals, stating that black people were happier during the era of cotton picking, i.e. before they had the same civil rights as white people, is indicative of an incredibly ignorant mindset and pretty goddamn racist. Hardly anyone is talking about this. A&E only mentioned his attacks on the LGBT community in their decision to suspend him. Why? Not that it ultimately matters, but a lot of Phil Robertson's supporters are saying that his suspension is an attack on his Christian beliefs. Is saying that black people were happier before the emergence of the civil rights movement part of Christianity? Again, why is nobody talking about this? Thirdly, and most importantly, the disagreement at the very heart of the controversy surrounds the nature of free speech. Supporters of Robertson are explicitly stating that he is being penalised for simply having an opinion, and that his right to freedom of speech and expression are being infringed upon. This is an incredibly simplistic and facile interpretation of what happened. Yes, everyone has the right to freedom of speech. No one is saying that he didn't have the right to say the things he said. But as much as everyone has the right to freedom of speech, no one has the right to freedom from the consequences of their speech. Everyone who appears on Duck Dynasty will almost certainly have been required to sign a contract that prohibits them from speaking or behaving in a way that reflects poorly on A&E's brand. Clearly, that's how A&E viewed Robertson's remarks, and they are expressing their right as a company not to be represented by those whose behaviour could damage their public perception. Freedom of speech is a civil right. If the government was stating that he couldn't say such things and was threatening him with fines or arrest as a result, that would be an infringement upon his freedom of speech. But A&E is not the government. It is a media company that can dictate its own rules and requirements to those whom it employs. They are not obliged to allow anyone to appear on their shows if they don't want them to. A&E were completely within their rights to suspend him, and they have done nothing illegal. The same principle applies to the controversy surrounding Chick-fil-A. If the owners of Chick-fil-A decide that they want to donate money that they make as a company to several anti-gay organisations, they can. It may be a detestable thing to do, but they have the right to do that if they wish, and nobody is saying that they don't, or at least they shouldn't be. Members of the public can then decide if they want to essentially fund anti-gay activism by patronising Chick-fil-A, or if they want to actively avoid it as a form of boycott. Similarly, members of the public should decide whether they agree with A&E's decision to suspend Phil Robertson, and act accordingly. They can either continue to use A&E's services, or they can boycott A&E, start petitions, or use social networking sites to make their opinions known if they so wish. That is your right to freedom of expression, and if you want to do that, fine. But don't act like this has got anything to do with infringements upon freedom of speech or expression. No one is saying that Phil Robertson does not have the right to say what he said, but what he said was a bunch of horrible shit about gay people and black people that A&E clearly does not want to be associated with. And crucially, they have every right not to be. Talking about this as if Phil Robertson is being persecuted for being Christian is infantile. Frankly, it makes you look like a bunch of fucking idiots. But hey, that's just me.